Why did you let him kill me? It was the clown. Make the clown go away.
South Dakota is rich in history and legends, with many stemming from oral traditions of the Lakota Sioux natives who have inhabited the area for centuries. With many historic landmarks, ancient burial grounds, and other worldly forests found throughout the Mount Rushmore state, there seems to be more legends than someone could possibly catalog, and today we will look at 10 of these. The Native Americans of Pine Ridge, South Dakota have their issues in the community, and group suicide is one such major issue that has only gotten worse over time. Some of the mysterious suicides have been attributed to a malicious spirit called Walking Sam. Although the name sounds harmless, the being itself is anything but. According to Native American lore, Walking Sam is an ancient being tied closely to the spiritual beings known as Stick Indians, which are shadow people or dark people. Legends told by the natives talk of these demonic presence that stalk the reservations and try to lure unsuspecting people to their doom. They are said to have a cloud of death that hangs over them and follows them no matter who they are stalking. According to legends, if you know one is near, you will hear whistling to you. If you follow the whistle, the being will paralyze you, hypnotize you, or drive you insane. If you disrespect them in some way, they will hold a grudge and will seek vengeance on you no matter what the cost. Some tribes still fear and respect these beings and refuse to speak of them outside of their community. The full legends of these beings are still unknown outside the indigenous communities, but it is known that Walking Sam is believed to be one such being and is one of the most powerful of them. Walking Sam is particularly sinister compared to the other stick people because of the way in which he gets his victims. He will approach his prey, his favorite being young people, and convince them they are not worthy of life. The victims will feel death in the air and hear voices in their heads telling them they no longer deserve to be alive. This will continue until they take their own lives. He is usually described as being really tall and thin, wearing a tall black hat. The most frightening is that he carries the bodies of his victims over his arms and will keep them with him wherever he goes, waiting to find new people to add to his collection. Recently, Walking Sam has been very active in the Native American communities. In December of 2015, there were 103 suicide attempts on the Oglala Lakota Reservation. This Sioux Nation was the one hit the hardest, and many attempts happened in groups. Only 9 of those attempts were successful, but all the victims were young. One was only 12 years old, and none of those who died was over 24 years old. Those losses weighed heavily on the tribe, and attempts have continued in more recent years. Most urban legends are brushed off as nothing to be concerned about, but that's not the case at Pine Ridge. Elders and other adults within the community are more than willing to bring up Walking Sam as a contributor to the high suicide rate in their community. At meetings, they discuss his presence and have noted more and more people claiming to have seen him recently. They warn others to stay away and not walk the streets at night because he is a dangerous spirit. Real or not, adults within the tribe are treating Walking Sam as a tangible, serious issue that needs to be addressed. Seth Bullock and Soul Star moved their hardware store from Helena, Montana to Deadwood, South Dakota in 1876. The same night they arrived at camp, Bullock began to auction equipment and supplies to the highest bidder. Soon after, they bought a lot on the corner of Main and Wall Street, the same location as the current Bullock Hotel. Within a year, a new store and warehouse was built, which became a successful hardware store for the partners. When Wild Bill Hickok died in August of 1876, the camp began to demand law and order. Because Bullock had been a sheriff in Montana, he was appointed the first sheriff of Deadwood. Seth has been described as a tall man with steely gray eyes. His imposing appearance commands instant respect. Bullock's grandson would go on to later say he could outstare a mad cobra or a rogue elephant. The hardware store continued to thrive and even survived Deadwood's devastating fire in 1879. Unfortunately, in 1894, the building was struck again by fire, this time destroying the hardware store, leaving only the brick warehouse standing in the rear of the building. With the hardware store destroyed, Seth and his business partner Soul decided to build Deadwood's finest hotel at the original store and warehouse site. Using native pink and white sandstone from Andrews Quarry, the construction began. The completed hotel boasted a restaurant that could seat 100 people and serve delicacies like pheasant and lobster. The lobby featured a red velvet carpet, brass chandeliers, oak trim, and a Steinway grand piano. The upstairs held 63 guest rooms furnished with oak dressers and brass beds. Each floor had a bathroom, and a library and parlor were located off the balcony. Before long, the hotel was the most sought-after luxury hotels of its time. In 1900, the smaller building adjoined to the hotel was bought by Bullock and served as the gentleman's bar. On September 23, 1919, Seth Bullock died of cancer at his ranch. He was buried on the high trail to White Rock above Mount Moriah Cemetery. According to reports, Seth continues to frequent his beloved hotel. All manner of strange happenings have been reported by both staff and guests, including the feeling of a strong paranormal presence in several rooms and the hallways of the second and third floors, as well as Bully's restaurant and Seth's chair. Others have reported seeing a tall, ghostly figure that resembles Bullock throughout the hotel. Apparently, Seth's ghost wants to ensure staff is working hard. Paranormal events seem to increase when the staff stand idle, whistling, or humming a tune. Plates and glasses have been reported to shake and then take flight in the restaurant. Lights and appliances turn on and off by themselves. Items move by unseen hands, and showers will turn on by themselves. Many guests have reported hearing their names being called by an unseen male or have been tapped on the shoulder by unseen hands. Others have reported hearing whistling and footsteps in the hallways when no one is there. In the rooms on the second and third floors, guests have reported many strange happenings, including photographs producing strange anomalies, alarm clocks randomly going off, even if unplugged, TVs operating by themselves, cloudy figures in their rooms and the hallways, and an antique clock that hasn't worked in years will chime by itself. The Sioux Hospital opened as a boarding school for the local Native Americans in 1898. From the start, it had a bad reputation with abuse and neglect common. Many students ran away only to be dragged back, and many of the students committed suicide in the building. A few years later, the doors were closed because of these reports. The building remained abandoned until 1939 when it was converted into a sanatorium to help with the TB outbreak. During these years, the treatments given to patients were nothing more than experimental surgeries, and many suffered greatly and most died. Suicides of patients was also frequent because of the misery they suffered. The sanatorium closed in 1960 and was abandoned for many years. Today, the building has been renovated into a public hospital and is still in operation. With all the suffering the building occupants endured throughout its history, most of the spirits reported here seem to be children, mostly of the Native American students who died here while it was a boarding school. The most common report here is of orbs throughout the hospital and the grounds. Other common reports are of many Native American children walking around the outside of the building for a few seconds and then fading away. They are always said to be looking down as if to show how unhappy they are. On October 2nd, 1927, one day before construction began on Mount Rushmore, Alex Johnson began work on a hotel of his dreams, a showplace of the West and a tribute to the Black Hills and Native Americans he so admired. The hotel opened its doors on July 1st, 1928, with the first guest being Patty O'Neill, whose name was used for the bar off the lobby today. The hotel's design blended the heritage of the Plains natives and German Tudor architecture, which represents the many German immigrants to the Dakotas. The historic Hotel Alex Johnson has long been known as one of the most haunted hotels in South Dakota. From the Lady in White to the ghost of Alex Johnson, there have been many reports of various paranormal activity. Perhaps the most popular ghost of Hotel Alex Johnson is the Lady in White. Legends say that during the 1970s, a young bride committed suicide by jumping out the window of her room 812. People who knew the young woman insisted it was foul play, stating she was too happy and friendly to have done that. She was also set to inherit a large sum of money soon. No one was ever convicted of her murder, and the suicide ruling stood firm. Since her death, guests have reported seeing a bride wandering the halls of the 8th floor in a white dress, searching for those responsible for her death. In her room, the window is often reported to be found open in the morning, and the dresser drawers are taken out and turned upside down and then put back in place. Another spirit said to wander the hotel is Alex Johnson himself. It is said that after his death in 1938, his spirit remained to ensure the hotel's operations went smoothly. There are also reports of a young girl on the 8th floor who knocks on doors at night and then disappears in the hallway. She has also been reported to be heard giggling up and down the same hallway. Spook Road is a rural road outside of Brandon, South Dakota, and is shrouded with many legends and hauntings. During the day, it is a scenic drive, but at night, the tunnel of trees and winding roads become unnerving, especially when you can't see what's around the next bend. One legend of Spook Road is if you drive one way, you will cross 5 bridges, but on the way back, there will only be 4. Another legend claims that people have been hung from the bridges, and as you drive across, you will feel like you are being watched. Some people have claimed to see eyes peering at them from the dark. Other stories say that ghostly apparitions will appear and disappear on the road, or can be seen hanging from the trees at night. Spook Road has creeped out many people of all ages for decades, and is both feared and loved by the locals. Fort Sisseton was established on August 1st, 1864 as Fort Wadsworth as a result of the 1862 Sioux Uprising. In 1862, Sioux tribes underestimated the U.S. government's ability to fight both the Civil War and the Sioux tribes, and began attacking all along the Minnesota frontier and Dakota territory, killing many settlers and miners wherever they found them. Over 400 settlers were killed just on the first day alone. In August of 1862, over 30,000 people were driven from their homes, and over 800 settlers were killed by the hostile Sioux. While the uprising was finally under control, the remaining Sioux people were moved to a reservation, but conflict continued. Fort Wadsworth was one of the forts established to police the reservations and enforce treaties and protect travel routes to the gold fields in Idaho and Montana. The fort was renamed Fort Sisseton on August 29, 1876, after the local Sisseton Sioux tribe, when it was discovered that the original name was the same as Fort Wadsworth on Staten Island, New York. By 1880, the need for the fort disappeared, and it was turned over to the Interior Department for disposition on April 22, 1889. By June 9, 1889, the Army had completely abandoned the fort. Fort Sisseton was designated as a state historical park in 1959, but seems the previous occupants seem to not have gotten the memo. Visitors to the fort have reported hearing footsteps behind locked doors and the feelings of being watched. The most common report is of mysterious lights, but others have reported having specific encounters with spirits. A worker staying late one night saw a woman, who is known as the Lady in White, walking from window to window in the old officers' quarters. Many others have also reported seeing the Lady in White at various times throughout the fort. On the grounds of the old fort, the spirit of a young boy is reported to appear to children visiting and tries to play with him. He is also reported to show up and escort guests around on late-night strolls. The Orpheum Theater opened on October 12, 1913, embracing both screen and stage performances. In 1927, the theater focus shifted to motion pictures until 1954, when the Sioux Fall Community Playhouse bought the building. It was then the strange happenings at the theater began to be reported. One evening in 1959, Ray Lofness, a local radio personality and actor, was alone on stage, practicing for an upcoming performance. It was then he noticed a blue aurora on the balcony area in the shape of a man. At first, he thought it was the play's director, but as he continued to practice, he noticed the figure had no shadow. Ray quickly left the theater, leaving all the lights on. The next day, Ray was informed that every fuse in the building had been blown the night before. During rehearsal 2 days later, a 10-pound bag of sand used in the rigging above the stage broke loose and hit Ray in the head, knocking him unconscious. Then, on opening night, the same sandbag that had been repaired broke loose again and hit Ray, this time breaking his collarbone. From then on, he refused to ever be alone in a theater. In 1972, Jack Morrison was sweeping the stage with a wide broom, cutting a visible path through the dust. When he turned around, he found a tiny type photograph of a bearded man with an intense gaze and rosy cheeks. Jack could find no plausible explanation of how it got there, and he had just swept the area seconds before. He placed the photograph on a light board and felt he should leave the theater for the night. That image remained where Jack left it until the light board was replaced. The theater's resident's ghost has since been nicknamed Larry and is said to have made his presence known many times since 1959. Cleaning staff have reported hearing unexplainable footsteps when no one else is in the building, and the box office personnel report strange cold spots and the feelings of being watched. Others have claimed to see the strange blue lights in the balcony area. Mount Moriah Cemetery was established in 1878, overlooking Deadwood Gulch, and is the final resting place for several Wild West legends, murderers, madams, and pillars of Deadwood's early economic development. Many of the older graves came from the bodies that were exhumed from the old Ingleside graveyard and moved to Mount Moriah. Mount Moriah serves as the final resting place for famous South Dakotians like Calamity James, Seth Bullock, and Wild Bill Hickok. The cemetery today is divided into different sections, including a children's section for the many children who died during the smallpox, scarlet fever, and diphtheria epidemic between 1878 and 1880. There's also a potter's field for the unmarked graves from the old Ingleside graveyard, a Jewish section, and a generic mass gravesite for those who perished in a fatal fire on Elk Creek in March of 1883. People who have visited Mount Moriah day or night have reported hearing disembodied voices and children's laughing when nobody is around. Other reports include the feelings of being watched and various apparitions wandering around the grounds. John Leary was born in 1849 in Newberry, New York. When he was 16, he left home to find his fortune. Leary first worked the famous Gold Hill mines near Virginia City before making his way to the Black Hills. On March 17, 1882, John's life would be changed forever. In a mine explosion that day, he lost both his hands, his sight in one eye, as well as his hearing in one ear. He wasn't expected to survive the explosion that killed hundreds of other miners that day. Leary was given hooks for hands, and not long after healing from the accident, he moved to Rapid City, South Dakota, where he became a night watchman. After 41 years on the force, tragedy struck Hooky Jack again. In November of 1926, he was hit and killed by a car in downtown Rapid City. The building that is now home to Sports Rock Tavern was, according to legends, where Hooky Jack lived on the third floor. According to reports, the third floor is a place where employees won't go, and a place where Hooky still resides. Security cameras have shown floating orbs and flashing lights on nights when no one is in the building. Customers and employees report seeing the billiard balls move on their own, hearing footsteps from above, and tables and chairs move on their own. Bartenders have reported seeing the apparitions out of the corner of their eye that settles up to a bar to have a drink and then disappears. Between 1927 and 1941, over 400 workers assisted in the construction of Mount Rushmore using jackhammers while dangling from scaffolds. Despite the dangers faced by the working conditions, none of the workers died during the construction, but once they did pass, many of them were laid to rest at the nearby Mountainview Cemetery that overlooks the monument. Mountainview Cemetery, also known as Keystone Cemetery, seems to be a quaint, peaceful cemetery, but there is something spooky lurking behind its beauty. According to reports, many spirits roam the cemetery. Visitors claim to see ghostly figures wandering the grounds, and some have claimed to have captured these figures on camera. Some people believe the spirits to be the former workers of Mount Rushmore. In addition to apparitions, people have claimed to hear disembodied voices, laughter, and other odd muffled sounds.